Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of the California State Library, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on the California Library Literacy Services Roles and Goals Framework. The webinar is presented by the State Library and is part of our Literacy Initiatives project, which is supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the State Librarian. Our presenter today is Randy Weaver, currently a literacy consultant and previously literacy coordinator at the San Francisco Public Library. Randy will discuss how and why to use the roles and goals. He will also introduce some updates that have been made to the goals to keep them relevant to your programs and your communities. All participants are muted, so please place any questions you have into the chat box. Randy will address questions at the end of each segment and at the end of the presentation as a whole. If you have any problems with your technology, please also use the chat function to let us know, and we will do our best to assist. We're recording today's webinar and it will be archived and made available on the Literacy Services website. And with that, I will hand you over to Randy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalie. It's great that so many of you have been able to join us today for this webinar. Before we begin, I also want to acknowledge our great photographers that contributed program photos for this presentation. Becky Ruppel and my old buddy from San Francisco Public Library, Brian Castaigne. If you've been working with library literacy services for a while, then part of this presentation will be a review of what you already know. But for others who are relatively new to the literacy program, much of this information will be new. At the conclusion of the webinar, we hope that you all feel that you've learned something that can benefit you and your program. As Natalie said, we will be breaking for questions at specific points in the presentation, but we are covering a lot of material today, so please don't take offense if we tell you we'll be getting to that. So here's generally what we will be talking about in today's webinar. General history of roles and goals, how roles and goals benefits our programs, our tutor-learner teams, and statewide services. We'll be unveiling the new roles and goals form. We'll be talking about how roles and goals can be used at learner intake, how to use it as a follow-up measure of progress. We'll be talking a little bit about collecting evidence so we can actually be confident that the goals being reported have actually occurred. And at the end of the webinar, we'll be looking at additional information available to support CLS staff and volunteers. So, underlying philosophy of CLS programs has always involved the focus on the individual needs of the adult learner. It was created as a way to help program staff and volunteer tutors understand what each adult learner wants to accomplish with their skills. Because we are all learner-centered programs, we recognize that an all-important first step in the intake process is getting to know the aspirations of our learners. And of course, roles and goals was also designed to track progress as tutor-learner teams review their achievement every few months. Helping learners establish personal literacy goals is really a core part of both CLS values and program essentials. In fact, our definition of an adult learner even includes the idea of goal setting. An adult learner must have completed an intake interview, have been assessed and be receiving instruction, and they must have established one or more literacy goals. Research has shown the importance of maintaining a focus on the personal goals of adult learner. Here are two quotes from literature addressing adult instruction. Library literacy services are different from traditional schools because we are interested in discovering what the adult learner wants to accomplish, and then using those real-life goals to set a learner-centered as opposed to a curriculum-centered course of instruction. These two quotes show the benefits of motivation to persist. Goal setting increases motivation and affects behavior and serves to energize learners. Also, adults should be engaged in curricula relevant to them. They need an understanding of their own literacy skills. So overall, I would say our approach is on target based on this type of research. Of course, goal setting has other benefits to learners. It helps them think about what they want to accomplish most, that all-important question, what brought them to the program in the first place. It helps them define what they want to be working on while they spend time in their tutoring. It helps them take ownership of their instruction, really become a partner in learning. They sometimes takes a little time for them to understand that this is not a top-down approach to education, but being a partner is all important in really establishing direction for their instruction. Helps them stay focused on what's most important in their lives. Definitely helps them stay motivated, and they build personal self-confidence based on the successful achievement of their goals. So the roles and goals form is a tool that we use to talk about learner goals and track progress toward achieving those goals. After we collect the personal goals of our adult learners, this information can be used in lesson planning and in the choice of instructional resources. By understanding what's important to our learners, a portion of our tutoring sessions can include time to focus on those specific needs. Here's an obvious example. Suppose on the new roles and goals form, the adult learner said that they would like to use technology more effectively. Then we know that at least a portion of the tutoring sessions will be spent on the computer or some other electronic device, actually practicing those skills. Then, at a minimum of every 6 months, we'll be checking in with each tutor-learner team to see how they're progressing toward their goals. The tutor-learner team will indicate if they're making progress on certain goals, or perhaps have even met some goals. And this process is an ongoing cycle, which will occur for as long as the learner is receiving instruction. The rules and goals data not only helps guide instruction and measure success, it can also be aggregated locally and statewide. One of the benefits of tracking learner achievement is that we can use the aggregated information to inform stakeholders of the effectiveness of our local programs. And as many of you know, our state librarian uses roles and goals data in his annual report to the legislature. This information is essential in establishing ongoing funding of CLLS services. So at this point, are there any general questions about the overall philosophy of the roles and goals process?
There are no questions in the chat box right now, Randy.
Okay.
We could give it maybe a minute to see if anyone would like to write in anything about what Randy has said so far. Any questions so far? But nothing coming in. So I think you're okay to proceed.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, participants. We'll now go ahead and talk a little bit about the updated roles and goals form itself. Updating the roles and goals form has been on the minds of library literacy staff for some time. And to begin working on this important task, Natalie at the State Library put together an excellent committee of literacy coordinators from a variety of different programs in the state: urban, rural, city, county, large, and small. Here's a list of this hard working group that began meeting in 2018. They received feedback from library literacy staff from around the state. And from this feedback, they made revisions, incorporating the ideas from the field. Early versions of a new roles and goals form were shared and discussed at CLA and at the CLLS staff conference in 2018. I might add that my experience on this committee really showed how dedicated this group was to listening to the input from their colleagues from around the state and really taking seriously what staff and library literacy programs were saying about what needed to be improved and tweaked as far as the roles and goals form is concerned. So after much work and discussion, we can now share with you the revised roles and goals form, which we will be using for the first time starting this July. It really should look quite similar. The main thing you'll notice are some updates, some new goals in each of the 4 adult learner roles. The revised standard goals, those that are reprinted on pre-printed on the form, were selected by the Roles and Goals Committee based on suggestions from around the state. And you will notice that on the bottom of page 2, there's still a place to record unanticipated achievements of the learner. A significant change in the new roles and goals reporting process will allow us the ability to track the actual dates for making progress. Literacy staff from around the state said that an ability to report progress made toward learner goals would be an important feature of any revision, because this is a useful indicator of learner progress. With a revised reporting process, these dates will now be tracked and reported to help us better understand the path toward goal achievement. Just another quick check-in, having just had a brief look at the new form. Any overall questions about that?
We do have a couple of things, Randy. First of all, Diane Shimota just says more of a comment. It looks really great. Thank you for adding the writing goals. And yes, we did hear that, and we wanted to include that. So Michelle G says, will we be reporting on making progress dates? And I'm going to say you would record that locally, but for the statewide reporting, we are finalizing the details, but it will be more likely to record whether a person, if the person didn't achieve a goal, you can check that they made progress towards a goal. And we will keep it very simple at the statewide level. And Cambria says, you said the new form begins July. So that's correct. We would like you to start using the new form in July. We know there'll be a transition period, but we will use the new goals in the reporting form for fiscal year 2020-2021. And Devin says, I'm very excited to see the made progress option. Thank you. Absolutely. Will we submit reports in the summer and then once again in the winter after the 6-month check-in? No. You'll still only be asked to submit 1 annual report. When will the new forms go out to the programs? We will make those new forms available in the spring. And they will be available from the library literacy website. And then we also had a question. And I think this one came in from the previous segment, Randy. What is the proposed plan for every 6 months? And am I correct that you're going to talk a bit more later on about the what happens at the 6 month check-in?
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions? Is this going to be available digitally? Yes, we will be making it available from the library literacy website for sure. And wondering about communicate better goals, and if this means verbal communication rather than reading, writing, literacy focus. That is a great question. Randy, would we be able to skip back to that?
Yes, but I think communication always involves both writing, reading and understanding, and speaking. So I don't think we meant to really compartmentalize that as much as just the general overall abilities to communicate.
Yes, I think, and that came out of a lot of conversations we've had, particularly around family literacy and about the desire for learners to improve their communications in general. So that one's coming from, from the community. And we had a quick thanks. You're welcome. Okay, so shall we move on to the next segment?
All right. Thanks, Natalie, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm going to start just reviewing the kind of best practices for how to use the roles and goals form initially during the assessment. During the initial intake, every new adult learner should be interviewed by literacy staff. And part of that interview should really be assessing what's important to that learner and what they want to accomplish. As you know, the roles and goals form is not designed to be used as a checklist. Instead, we want to get at those goals through a conversation with the learner as we get to know what's most important to them. Sometimes learners may not grasp the concept of personal goals, and many CLLS staff members have created alternative, creative ways of collecting this important information. You probably already have your own list of questions that you use to do this, but here are a few more. What would you like to be able to accomplish that you can't accomplish now? I know you want to read better, but what would you like to read? We often get the response, well, I just want to read better, I just want to write better, but we need to drill down just a little bit to find specifically what type of material they want to read and write. Think of yourself at work, at home, or in the community. What would you like to do with your improved skills? Are there things you've always wanted to do but couldn't because of your limited writing and reading skills? Some programs have used what we call the adult role map as a way of eliciting initial goals from adult learners. It's usually best, whether you use the role map or not, to take notes on a separate piece of paper and later transfer the goal information to the roles as goals form. As you can imagine, if a learner was staring at the actual roles and goals form, it could be quite distracting in the whole process of having this conversation. This is used by many programs because it's visual, it's a way of starting the conversation, and it's easy to transfer the information from the adult role map to the roles and goals form later. And it starts by, once again, asking a very simple question. What is it that you would like to be able to do that you can't do now? Using the roles and goals form for the first time, you will be concerned with two kinds of goals. The first are the standard pre-printed goals, which are already found on the form. You may elaborate with more specific notes as necessary. For instance, this person wants to write a note, message, or text, and he specifically wants to do this for his sister. And the second example here is person wants to be able to use the library, but the first step for that purpose is to replace their lost library card. The standard goals are the ones that we have heard most commonly used by adult learners around the state. They are common to literacy instructional activities. They're descriptive of what's actually happening in library literacy instruction. And many of these goals are meaningful to stakeholders, the library, elected officials, and taxpayers. Another way to set goals is to write in those that are of interest to your learner but are not found in the standard goal section. It's important not to be overly ambitious when you're filling out the roles and goals form itself. Setting too many goals can be overwhelming. It's best to think of what can actually be accomplished within the next 4 to 6 months. You can always have a chance to go back and add more goals as the roles and goals sheet is updated. And of course, once the form is completed, you should make a copy for the office and others who regularly work with the learner, whether it's volunteer tutors, computer lab volunteers, or staff, should also have access to the person's goals. And of course, we hope that the tutor-learner team will want to have a copy of their goals to keep with them during their tutoring sessions. Any questions about the initial use of the roles and goals form?
Yes, we do have a question. The question is, should this be done after we assess them?
You know, I think there are different ways of doing that. In our program in San Francisco, we did it after the formal assessment. However, I don't think there's any rhyme or reason for doing it one way or the other. It may be more comfortable to do it at the beginning of the interview. I'm sure other people have ideas about this.
And also, if you do have ideas, feel free to put them in the chat and we can also share them with the group. We have another question. How do we report the write-in goals? That won't change, just the same way that you've always done that.
Right.
So the example for the question, should this be done after we assess them, is my goal is to pass the GED assessment, first grade reading level, not accomplishable in 4 to 6 months. So Randy, how would you tackle that one?
Yeah, I think that might take a little more digging. You might have to ask, talk to the learner about what they need to be able to do to pass that test and to sort of deconstruct the steps necessary to get to that point. And perhaps mark the initial objectives toward that long-term goal and start working toward those rather than just marking the long-term goal and just working with that.
We have, how many goals do you recommend setting?
I think our recommendation from the best practices section was a number of goals that can actually be addressed in a 4 to 6 months period before the next update of the roles and goals form. Of course, we realize that things change. We'll be talking about this in just a minute. Sometimes goals need to be removed from the updated form. Sometimes goals need to be added. But I think the important part about using the roles and goals is to stay focused on a number of goals that can actually be worked on effectively during the next 4 to 6 months.
Absolutely. And then Carol says, hers is more of a comment, doing roles and goals first is part of establishing rapport to make them comfortable before assessment. And then Diane says, I ask for goals during the assessment to make sure the learners are fit for the program. I asked the learner to tell the tutor during our initial meeting so that both are on the same page and I'm present to help provide materials that make the goal possible and to make sure it's something that the learner is able to accomplish in 6 months or a year. For longer term goals, I acknowledge it as a goal and suggest we include it as a longer term goal. And these seem like great suggestions and ones that we hear from other people too. Do you agree, Randy?
Yeah, definitely. That's the benefit of having all of us taking part in this discussion.
And then we have a process question for you, Randy. From Devin, I worry that keeping dates will seem cumbersome to tutors and create even more ambivalence about reporting. If the dates are not really of use to us internally, should we still require them? I currently keep track of the quarter in which the goal was reached only.
We'll be talking about this in a minute. The most important thing is to have a date, some date that goal was set, because we need a start date and an ending date when we talk about achieving goals. So in that respect, a beginning date is important. You can't really report that a goal has been achieved if we don't know when they started working on it.
And then we also had a question from David. Are the other goals counted, or should we try to adjust the standard goals first? And Randy, what have you done in your experience?
I know there's always been a place to report other goals when we do our state reporting. And sometimes I realize that in real life, you actually have more other goals than standard goals. So I think if it means adding those other goals and staying focused on those goals, and those goals are important to the learner, I think that's really something we should do.
Yeah, I think the main thing is to stay learner-centered. You know, if something does fit with one of the standard goals, that's fantastic. But if it really doesn't, it really doesn't. And the more that we hear from people about the different other goals they've set, then it may become a standard goal, as some of them have, which is why we've made the changes. Okay, so Cambria asks, do longer term goals all go on the same roles and goals form, or only those within the 4 to 6 month time frame?
Well, you can always continue to reset a goal if it's a long-term goal. I think when I was talking about deconstructing a long-term goal into shorter-term segments, I was thinking that if you can do that, you can see accomplishments of those objectives before even the long-term goal can be accomplished. But that long-term goal does need to be acknowledged, you're right, even though it may have to be reset. But you also will be able to show progress toward that goal as you work through the objectives toward actually reaching that goal.
And then we have, is there a reason to have the learner name on one side, tutor on the other?
No, that was just what traditionally was on the older form. I think Natalie and I are probably up to making changes in that.
If everybody felt that wouldn't work, we could happily change that.
Yeah.
And then Cassandra says, another comment, for number of goals, I like to say up to about 3 goals to start with. But it may depend on how interrelated some goals are or how much they depend on similar skills or level of skill. And again, that seems like a very reasonable approach there.
Right.
And then Luis says, Alameda County has many groups with 6 to 10 learners every 3 to 4 month sessions. How do other programs complete the roles and goals form on a regular basis, 1 to 2 times per year for groups? And I don't know if Randy, this is something you had experience with in San Francisco, or something we open to the group to.
I think it's something a question we want to put out there for others in that same with that same experience.
And so while we see if any of those come in, Val asks, how often can we get credit for progress? For the state level reporting, if a person is making progress 1 year, I mean, I'm thinking this would be maybe a long-term goal. If they're making progress 1 year, they're still making progress the following year, you still report that they are making progress. If they haven't achieved the goal, you keep them in the making progress category until they do achieve the goal. And that's what we're hoping to capture, those people whose accomplishments perhaps weren't acknowledged in the state reporting because we've been asking only achieved a goal, not achieved a goal. But if a person's making progress, even if it's taking them 2 to 3 years to make that progress towards the goal, keep them in that category. We had a recommendation to capture group goals. It might make sense to update the goals near the end of the group session. And I think the group question might be one that may take a while to discuss. And I know Randy's going to be available to your literacy network meetings. And I feel like when he goes to those meetings, it might be a good opportunity to have these kinds of conversations and figure out the best strategy for you for recording group goals. This one seems like a bit of a conversation to me. One suggestion, maybe a specific section to put long-term goals with space to deconstruct them into smaller goals. And I think that's what we want you to use the form for, to use it. You know, you'll see that many of the longer term goals, the shorter term goals that lead up to that goal are on the form. So it would be a case of using the form to meet your needs in that way. We did experiment with a more complex form, but we heard quite conclusively from the field that everybody wanted the form to stay as simple as possible, which is why we've just kept the lists of goals rather than the different sections of longer term, shorter term, because also we don't know what is long term or short term for an individual person either. So, but yes, feel free to use the form that way. And I'm just going to take a couple more and then we'll let Randy move on to his next section. So, Tony says it's easier to set the form goals for groups and track them over short periods of time. More complicated goals are easier to track, make progress and achieve with one-on-one tutoring. And can the form be converted to a digital format or a survey type format that can collect the responses all in one place? We will work on making that happen for you for sure. Yes. Louise, we will do. And then Chelsea said, do we reset the goal each year, Randy, as we continue to note making progress, or do we reset on the new year as their goal being actively in progress?
I think we're going to look at that in just a minute as we look at the roles and goals follow-up, which is coming next. Okay,
fantastic. Thanks, Randy.
All right, thanks for those great questions and great advice. Once again, I feel that's the strength of our program, is that we all can help each other and provide even more benefit statewide to what we're all doing. So with that, I'm going to talk about roles and goals follow-up, which typically happens a minimum of every 6 months. You'll be checking in with tutor-learner pairs to see how they're progressing toward their goals. This is an opportunity to do many things, which include check overall progress, see if the instruction is on course for what the learner wants to accomplish, make sure that the learner needs are being met, help the learner see that they are making progress, build confidence in the tutor-learner pair as they see goals being achieved, and motivate the learner and the tutor and the staff also to keep up the good work and continue with their tutoring sessions. At this point, when they're doing the follow-up, they'll also be able to add any new goals, remove goals, and record unanticipated achievements, just like before. I've always felt that even if the roles and goals process wasn't mandated, it would still be important for tutors, learners, and staff to go through these steps because it really is a way of looking back and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the learners through our instruction. When we're doing updates, again, simply use the month and year to indicate a goal set, making progress, and goal met. The goal set or goal met can reflect the real date the goal was set or achieved, and does not have to match the date the form was administered as an update. But it is important to remember that there must be a date for the goal set column for every goal met or making progress. In order to document that change has happened in the life of the adult learner, we need a starting point and an ending point. If for some reason the goal set date has been left off the form, the staff should try to contact the tutor-learner team and ask them to recall or estimate this information. If it's not possible to establish even an approximate date for that date set, then that goal is best recorded as an unanticipated achievement. As I mentioned a minute ago, you can always remove goals which are no longer interested in, the learner is no longer interested in pursuing. And you can also reset the same goal, especially if it reflects a higher level of competence, or if someone was just mentioning a long-term goal that continues to need more progress. For instance, if your learner wants to write a letter again, but in a more formal style, or he or she may want to read a more complex newspaper or magazine, or share more complicated books with his or her child. These do not have to be first-time goals. Once again, these new goal set can show either the date that the learner decided to set a new goal or the date that the form was administered. The other goals, or the write-in goals, are updated in a similar fashion. And once again, there's always a place for the unanticipated achievements that may have occurred in the learner's life. And remember, once again, unanticipated really means that a goal was not formally set on a previous roles and goals form. They're still important to the learner. They're still things that we want to know about, but they're things that happen just as a result of the overall improvement of the learner's literacy skills. Of course, make sure that when the roles and goals forms are returned, that you make a copy and place it in the learner's file. And of course, make sure that there's a copy for the tutor and learner to refer to during their tutoring sessions. And I think this is an important point that we see pictured here on the slide. Take time to celebrate, even in a small way. You want to really highlight what both you and the learner have accomplished over the last few months. Once again, we're going to catch up with a few questions about the follow-up.
We do have a couple of questions. So one is, if the goal says communicate better and a learner does it better, does that by definition mean goal met and not made progress? Which is a great question. And, because the word better, is a difficult one. And when we talked about, but we have included it because it does reflect what we're hearing from learners that they want to see. So at the moment, we will be having guidelines to specifically clarify all of this so that it is, manageable and doable for everybody to implement. But at the moment, the feeling is, yes, if it will be, and Randy will be talking about, how you assess whether, goals are met and whatnot. But if the learner feels that they have accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, you could say that is met. If they feel like they're still really working on it, even if there has been some improvement, they haven't really got to where they want to be, there you would say, making progress. So that's what I would say to that one. What about you, Randy?
I agree. I think there definitely has to be a little more explanation supporting some of the new goals on the form, but we will be working on that.
Yeah, and so we really appreciate these questions, which is why we wanted to do this webinar now and not as we introduce in July, because these questions will make sure that the guidance we make available is very clear and really helps you. So keep coming with the questions, but we do appreciate the gray area with that word, and we will make it clear. Chelsea says, I noticed 819, August 2019, for using technology. This is from the year prior. Is this how we should note the goal or reset to the current year? I think that was from one of your examples there, Randy.
Let me go back and look at that, because I don't recall seeing that.
Although it would be the current fiscal year.
Oh yeah, use technology more effectively. That's an example of resetting the same goal. Perhaps it's a goal that, well, obviously that could be a long-term goal that just goes on continually because technology is always changing. But that is an example that I put in for resetting the same goal. Of course, you could also show making progress for that goal as well.
Thank you, Randy. And then Wendy says, how would you notate a reset goal on the page? Which you may have just answered.
Which goal is a question about? I'm sorry.
I think it's a general question from Wendy. How would you notate a reset goal on the page?
I think it's just with a new goal set date. That was not a very good example, I realize now, putting that on the slide. But yeah, I think when you turn in your roles and goals form, staff will see the recently set dates for the new goals. So resetting a former goal using the current date, I think, is the best way of doing that.
And of course, if other people have suggestions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat box, and we can all learn from how other people are doing it in their programs. Because I think with some of this, there isn't just one way to do things, and you have to make it work for you. So let us know if you have a different way. And then Chelsea, in response to your response, Randy says, awesome, thank you. And on that note, shall we go to the next segment?
All right. Once again, thanks everyone for your thoughts and ideas. And this is obviously an ongoing process of becoming comfortable with this new form. And I appreciate your ongoing input, in which Natalie and I will be receiving and taking to heart. So now I want to go on to something slightly new that we're going to be asking the tutors and staff to do. And this is collecting evidence of goal achievement. We really, with the introduction of the new form, we really want to encourage program staff and tutors to collect evidence or indicators of goal achievement. This gives us confidence in that goals that we were reporting have met have actually occurred. There are 3 types of evidence that might be used to indicate goal achievement. One is something you can physically point to, which shows that a goal has been achieved. For example, an application for employment filled out correctly, a letter or email written to a family member, a book read for the first time, or a note to a child's teacher. The list really goes on and on. Other evidence might include a conversation with the learner in which he or she describes goals that they feel they have achieved. This conversation about achievement might include newfound abilities of accessing community services, communicating with their child's school, or speaking to others about the library literacy program. The third type of evidence is something that the tutor might witness in terms of progress toward goal achievements. Some things the tutor might witness may not have even occurred to the learner, but the tutor has seen some indicators that this goal has been accomplished or the goal has seen progress. And as I said, by collecting the specific evidence or indicators of goal achievement, it really builds confidence that the roles and goals process is accurate and representing the accomplishments of our adult learners. And it also provides the tutor and learner with another opportunity to review their work together and think about what they have achieved. There are some ways that you can facilitate this, of course, in your programs. This is a sheet that might be used for tutor-learner teams to keep track of the goals. It is tied directly to the associated role within the roles and goals format. The notes regarding achievements can be kept by the learner and tutor as a record of what's been accomplished through their tutoring sessions. And also program staff may wish to make a copy of the learner's file. Another tool that many programs have used with some success over the years is the learner portfolio. Portfolio is a collection of work made up of snapshots of various activities that are taking place in the tutoring session. The choice of what to include in the portfolio is completely up to the adult learner. Just as an artist chooses their best pieces to display in a portfolio, so will the learner choose work that they're most proud of and which they feel shows evidence of their personal progress. The tutor-learner team can integrate portfolio use into their regular sessions by setting aside time every few weeks to review the work they have done and to choose what really shows progress. The strength of the portfolio is really tied to the ongoing discussions between tutors, learners, and staff that goes into creating it. It's not only a great tool for motivation for both the tutor and learner, I might add, but it can also be reviewed by the tutor and learner team when it comes time to update the roles and goals form. And I think good practice involves asking the learner to include a little statement with each piece that they put aside in their portfolio. The statement should be dated, and the learner should say why they picked this piece and why this piece shows something they've learned or some progress has been made. All right, any questions at this point? We're almost done.
We do have a couple. Okay, Val says, will unanticipated achievements be captured in year-end reports? And I will speak to this one. Yeah, we will be adjusting the year-end reports to reflect the changes. We do want to capture that. We will be asking for a balance between hearing from you about unanticipated achievements without encumbering you with having to, report on everybody's unanticipated achievements and make the reporting too cumbersome and too burdensome. So it may be highlights, it may be summaries, and so we will work on that. We will give everybody advance notice, but obviously the roles and goals section of the reporting form will be updated for 2021 for when you report on year 2020 to 2021, which will be summer 2021, and you will see the changes in good time. Diane says she's uncomfortable asking for filled out forms as evidence, but isn't the act of getting a job itself evidence of filling out the form and interviewing, etc.?
Right, that form is not necessary, but collecting evidence, I think, is still an important process to go through in any kind of informal way that you might want to do it.
Absolutely, it's that balance between rigor and what is comfortable and appropriate in any individual situation. And because every situation will be different, it will be, your judgment as to what is appropriate at the time. And then Tony asks if you could explain the symbols.
Oh, on the
that we inherited. And as we said, we are going to be, before these all go live, we'll be making adjustments based on all the feedback we're getting today and any in the future. So this is a form we inherited.
Yeah, we did inherit this. And I think the tools are kind of obvious. that deals with the workplace. The little house seems pretty meaningful to me. The book and the world, that I think we're, like Natalie said, we're open to updates. It wouldn't be a big deal to change these things if there's an overwhelming call for it.
But hopefully you have seen them before on the form. Yeah. They're long-standing icons, but we're refreshing the look and feel of all of it. So if people really don't like those, they can definitely be changed.
Send us something better.
Yeah. Sabrina says she really likes the evidence piece being included. Someone else says, yes, I love the examples of the portfolio and the evidence of goal achievement. So that's great that you love that addition. Will we make the evidence worksheet available?
Yes, that's the general idea. As soon as we update those little icons.
Yes. Diane says, is the evidence something I see or something that I collect and keep on file? And also Nancy says, I feel confident getting a written or verbal acknowledgement of goal accomplished via our monthly tutor reports. Am I documenting the proof in the year-end report? No, we won't. We will ask you to be sure to collect the evidence, but we won't be asking you to report all of that. No, not at all. It's just
that's an internal process for you, just so you have confidence that goals have been achieved.
Yes. And then Chelsea says she thinks having an image is helpful, especially since many arrive without reading. And would you provide the learner their portfolio if they leave the program? Or should that need to be retained by the program for historical information? That is a great question.
It is a great question. As we all know, learners are free to leave and re-enter at any time. So a re-entry learner would benefit from having that information stay in the program office. I don't think there's any one way of doing it. I think you know better what's going to work for your population.
And yeah, I think it's a local decision for what works for you. And okay, so I see we have 8 minutes left, Randy, so I'm going to hand back over to you.
Wow. Okay. So as Natalie said, we are preparing documents that are going to be on the CLS website to provide further support. And obviously, with the wealth of questions and input that we had today, these documents are going to grow and expand. But right now, this is what we're looking at. And some of this is similar to what's already online to help you. We have just a general introduction to roles and goals. We'll have, obviously, the new roles and goals form. We're going to do a frequently asked questions sheet about roles and goals, which will probably incorporate many of the new aspects of the revised roles and goals. We'll have that adult role map if you want to use that, and the evidence sheet also if you want to use that. And we'll have a more detailed outline of how to work with learner portfolios. And an ongoing and possibly more long-term goal is to update the roles and goals curriculum. We'll do the best we can to get through this. We're also going to be asking for your help. So if any of you want to help recreate some of that curriculum, we'd certainly be happy to have your assistance. And I'd also like to remind you that excellent support can always be found locally among those experienced coordinators in your regional networks. And as Natalie said, I am going to be available to attend regional network meetings either physically or electronically, so we can have more discussion about the new roles and goals form. In fact, I have a date scheduled with SCLLN, I think in the late spring. We'll be doing that through Zoom, and hopefully we'll have even more to report and discuss at that time. Any questions?
We had one from Diane. She did say, she has a comment too. She appreciates taking the time to update the goals and finds it very helpful and appreciates the process. And she also asks that, is the portfolio kept by the tutor and learner team, or does she keep the portfolio?
I didn't get the question, I'm sorry.
Okay, Diane says, is the portfolio kept by the tutor-learner team, or does the coordinator keep the portfolio?
Yes, my experience is usually that's kept by the tutor-learner team. In fact, if you can have your learner accept responsibility for keeping it, that's even better, because that really shows that they have ownership of the process. But yeah, I think the tutor-learner team are the people who benefit from keeping that, and they need to go back and review it at crucial times, like times for updating the roles and goals form.
Okay. Randy, is there anything that you have more for us? Are we in open question time at this point?
Yes, I think we are in open question time.
Oh, that's fantastic. What great timing. We have 5 minutes left for your questions. So if anybody has anything on anything Randy has said today, please put it in the chat box or the Q&A box. They're coming in both areas. So please let us know and we'll respond. And
Carol raised their hand.
she did raise her hand. Carol, are you able to type your question into the chat? Or shall we unmute you?
Wow.
I'm going to unmute Carol. Go for it, Carol. I'm trying to unmute you, Carol, and I can't. So if you could type it in, that would be great. I'm sorry. Will the slides be available with today's webinar recording? Absolutely. Yeah, they will be. When will the form and documents be available? We're aiming for the spring, April. We're working on those. We wanted to have this webinar nice and early to gather your comments, to give you time to provide additional feedback afterwards and through the network meetings, so that the final documents that we produce are exactly what you need. And we are looking at April to give everybody time to prepare before July. Okay. Wendy says, somehow I feel there should be more recognition of the need for digital literacy in all areas. Thank you, Wendy. We will take another look with that in mind for sure. Thank you. And if you have specific suggestions, feel free to email us separately after the webinar or give us a call. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. Oh, Val says, how do we measure enhanced student confidence?
Well, I think that's always been a question, right? Because that's one of the byproducts of adult literacy instruction is increased self-confidence. I think if you can actually establish examples of how that self-confidence manifests itself in the learner's life, that would be a great way of reporting it. Even if it's just in the unanticipated achievements, actually that's where much of those accomplishments are recorded.
And Wendy is suggesting pictures of big smiles in the portfolio. Always good. Can never go wrong with some pictures of big smiles.
No. Or stars.
Okay, so then I think it might be time to wrap up. So thank you everybody for joining us. We will be making the recording available. You will see Randy at a network meeting near you soon. And if he's not on your schedule, please feel free to reach out to him or reach out to your network chair to reach out to Randy. And please be in touch, because we want to make sure that these updates and these slight changes are definitely meet your needs. and so any feedback will help us do that. And one quick question before we go: the roles and goals would be turned in once a year with the annual report correct? That is correct. That is not changing. We will keep the reporting, as we noted earlier, might slightly change as we ask you. We'll give you the opportunity to provide us with a little more information should you choose to, but nothing is not huge changes in the reporting, apart from the progress, the opportunity to record progress in the annual reports. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.